Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security. The Cognitive Crucible is a forum that presents different perspectives and emerging thought leadership related to the information environment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of or endorsement by the Information Professionals Association.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is David Cook, who spent a decade in the U.S. Army in both conventional and special operations units focused on the Middle East. After his time in the Army, David joined Congressman Darrell Issa as a fellow and then National Security Advisor. David co-authored several strategic documents at Army OSINT office and then the Defense Intelligence Agency, along with contributing to the most recent OSINT strategy released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He then led the go-to-market efforts of a leading OSINT software company, and he is once again working with Congressman Issa as his national security advisor. Dave Cook, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the conversation I'd like to have with you today, Dave, will cover a recent article that you wrote entitled "When Cell Phones Kill: Digital Discipline and the Future of SOF Obscurity." And we will have a link to this in the show notes for those who would like to check it out. And by the way, shout out and thanks to Dave Grahoski, who shared this article with me and and brought it to my attention. But before we get into this important topic, could we please start by getting your general assessment of our strategic landscape, or if you prefer, the times in which we live?
Yeah. Man, it's easy to make a comparison to the Cold War. I don't like to do that. Special operations particularly is having a moment as they sort of wrestle with how to deal with great power competition. It's for those in the soft community, I think it's not that hard. We're actually, purpose built for this kind of thing within the gray zone or irregular warfare or whatever you want to call it. But taking a step back, I think that coming out of counterterror operations more than 2 decades and figuring out that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, some of the state-sponsored militias and transnational criminal organizations, all the stuff that you'll see in the national security strategies and everything, are alive and well, and we are relearning how to deal with it. And it no longer is about counting tanks and ICBMs. It's about information. It's about subversion. We're learning more about deception. We could have a whole podcast on AI generated information warfare. But the threat surface is ubiquitous. It's you and me. I'm talking into a microphone. I'm in the DC area. I actually don't know where John is, but
I'm in the Portland, Oregon area.
Oh man, it's early there, huh?
Yeah.
But nothing is localized anymore, and I think that everything can be sort of produced at scale, even information, even narratives, even cognitive warfare. So with that, I think the private sector offers a very wide, broad threat vector for adversaries to attack. I think with the new Trump administration has come in and sort of taken a step back from military deployments, not so military action, I guess. But global commerce has not stopped, and in fact, it's probably going to increase. They've got different challenges to maneuver with tariffs and adversarial nations, sanctions, all this kind of stuff. But if you think about how data flows and how the private sector has expanded globally, that allows for adversaries and the private sector to be the first touch point in sort of adversarial action, whether it's in the cyber realm or it's,
Hmm.
trade-based money laundering or, uh, name your sort of
Hmm. Hmm.
subversion tactic. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's an analogy that comes to mind for me is that the U.S. Navy was originally chartered to help keep the sea lanes open for commerce, and it still has that mission. Uh, I I've heard serious people talk about the Space Force as being having an analogous mission with the Navy to help keep the communication commerce lines open in the space domain. And it seems like there is not a commensurate organization with the mission of keeping the digital lines of commerce open. I don't know. I guess maybe thinking about it a little bit more. I mean, would U.S. Cyber Command have a mission that would be commensurate to that? But that's U.S. Cyber Command is not the same as a military service with that kind of a charter. What are your thoughts on those kinds of analogies?
Yeah, so for Cyber Command, I think about the SolarWinds hack. I think
Hmm.
that the egress point was actually a physical location in the United States. And so if you look at sort of how the intelligence community who has authorities outside the United States worked with some of the federal law enforcement inside the United States, and that attack was perpetrated by whatever, GRU or SVR, I can't remember which one, but Russia. And I wholly believe that they knew that, the interagency process is broken,
Mm.
at worst, complicated at best.
Hmm.
So, working with those authorities is hard to figure out who's got command, right? And so back to US Cyber Command, and that's a DoD element. So when you start to get to, what's their jurisdiction, it gets complicated. And by the way, who found the SolarWinds hack? It was, I don't want to say the wrong company, but it was a private sector company
Hmm.
that found it and published the report. The other thing from my own experience is um, I did a couple deployments with Special Operations Command Forward
Hmm.
Yemen. And Yemen, there's about 30 miles of navigable space between, the port of Aden and Somalia. And there's an imaginary line that runs right through there that
Mm.
divides Central Command and AFRICOM or Africa Command. And man, if we wanted to do anything that had to do with sort of maritime operations in the information domain, we had to get sign off from
Yeah.
AFRICOM. And
Yeah.
even that was hard. So,
I'll bet.
um, I think honestly, um, I think the best way to do this is actually arm the private sector and give them, first of all, incentive to sort of defend their space and give them some sort of conduit to report what they see. And, if you really want to get crazy with it, go back and look at, some of the 18th century policies where we
Yep.
gave uh
Letters of marque.
yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
some
Yep.
privateering stuff like
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes, but we actually had an episode about a year ago now, or maybe less than a year ago, with JD Maddox, and JD Maddox was talking about these kinds of rekindling potentially some of these kinds of initiatives in order to better steel ourselves for today's operating environment, and turning turning businesses into porcupines, so that they're, not just, like, so, less vulnerable, but also, less appetizing. But uh, your point is a good one, I think, in that, there's a major gap in our national position with, you know thousands, tens of thousands of businesses which are only just now starting to, wake up to cyber security, needs in order to be um, uh, viable in today's, commerce landscape. So, huge need. And so I think that your article, is ostensibly about, uh, digital discipline for the military and, the special operating forces. But there are lessons all over the place for businesses today as well. So, maybe we ought to get into your article just a little bit more. Title is, when cell phones kill. So what does that mean? If a audience member, might not have thought a whole lot about this, what does that mean? That's pretty provocative. How do cell phones kill?
Yeah. Well, if you didn't know that that thing that's in your pocket that has more computing power than the first Apollo that landed on the moon is actually a homing beacon. So it can track you. It can realize whether you're walking upright or sitting or sitting. It can now realize if you've been in a car accident. So um, there are so many
Hmm.
sensors within a cell phone and some enterprising private sector folks have figured out all kinds of ways to track its cell phone. And I don't know about you, but I don't go many places
Hmm.
without my cell phone.
Hmm.
So if you can track that, you can track a person.
Yeah. My mom's best friend. Hi, Mom. She listens to every episode. My mom's best friend, about 6 months ago, she got her vehicle stolen, and her cell phone was in her vehicle when it was stolen, and the thieves, uh, I don't know, saw the cell phone in her vehicle as they were speeding away or something, and they threw the cell phone out the window, going down the Katy Freeway in Houston, Texas, or something like that. But then my mom's best friend's son, who also happens to live in the Portland, Oregon area, he got like a medical alert from Apple because of the way they had things set up, that his mother had gotten into a accident or had fallen or something like that because of the accelerometer and the sensors in the cell phone. All of a sudden noticed, hey, something happened to this cell phone. Now it labeled what happened incorrectly. It didn't know. It's like, it appears that the cell phone has been stolen and thrown out a car window. It didn't say that. It said, hey, I think that your mother must have fallen or something like that. But he got an alert that something had happened based upon the change in the accelerometer. And I think that's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And hi, John's mom. Glad you're okay.
Yeah. Well, so what are some of the lessons that we're learning from the Ukraine war right now with respect to digital security and how to operate more effectively in today's environment?
Yeah, so Ukraine offers a really interesting blueprint because you have sort of a state actor within your threat matrix, right? Russia's very savvy in their cyber operations and their signals intelligence. So I think for the average listener and average user, you have to figure out who's in your threat matrix. And if Russia is trying to actively target you, you should probably read this article first and then, go find some more advanced tradecraft. But um, so folks, I mean, Russia is targeting using cell phones and signals um, as targets for artillery rounds. And they're not only doing that, they are, if you can draw a geofence around a particular area.
Do you think you could back up just a moment and describe what you mean by geofencing?
Oh yeah. So if you look at a map, if you look at grid squares on a map, and if you sort of draw a circle around an area and say, I think there are enemy troops here. Um, there are some, signals intelligence tools. There are even open source intelligence tools that can actually pull out or extract different types of emissions or signals. And the ones here that we talk about in the article are advertising IDs, which is a sort of a unique identification that is made up of a whole bunch of data points from your cell phone, from apps, from your online
Hmm.
behavior, from cookies. It's a whole host of things. Um, but that's just one thing that you can use, right? Advertising IDs. And it's probably, I would say, the most dangerous because it's available commercially. So people can buy these data sets online. And there's a really good study actually that Duke University did for data brokers where they acted like they were a commercial company with very little credentials, and they went to the top 5 data brokers and bought data sets on veterans that included their addresses from public records, their online activity. So if you were, and they did it with a .asia in one example, a .asia domain.
Wow.
So think about how little vetting and little due diligence some of these data brokers have and some of the data sets that are out there. But I digress. We went down a little rabbit hole there,
Yeah,
but
well, so I'm sorry, continuing that rabbit hole, that is could be considered what is the technique? It's not red teaming, or is it like black hatting, or where you're penetration testing an organization but doing it in a little bit of a different way, just to kind of te test the boundaries to see how potentially brazen you could be and still have a legitimate organization just turning over valuable intelligence to you.
yeah, yeah, I would say red teaming, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
because and I mentioned this in the article about open source intelligence. We've done this a lot with, especially, I mean, we used to do it at Army Special Operations. Um, we see it more and more today in the corporate sector of physical and executive protection, where using open source intelligence to sort of red team a principal, right?
Hmm.
Figure out where they're going to be when, what, if they're openly communicating on social media, what, when, and where their locations are going. And it's easy, right? It's a double-edged sword for a lot of corporate executives and principals because they're keynoting at
Yeah. Yeah.
some conference or whatever. And the other thing too is family and
Hmm.
friends, and
Hmm.
they're usually the weakest link. I have another story about that, but I think
Yeah. 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 We were talking about lessons from Ukraine, and you mentioned geofencing. So, could you
yeah.
please hop back onto that discussion thread?
Right, right. Okay, so geofencing. I can draw a circle around a certain geographical area and sort of extract emissions or signals from that. And Russia is using that for if there's a certain like little cluster of, I'll just use advertising IDs, because Russia's using a whole bunch of signals to target Ukrainian defense forces. But advertising IDs, just because I just sort of explained it, if there's a cluster of those, say around a certain area, then you know, I'm just gonna target my artillery there.
Hmm.
I've heard of more advanced tactics where they'll actually extract sort of a cell phone, they'll map if they can't find it, there are lists available, publicly available, that have either been leaked or hacked and leaked. So I've heard of some of the Ukrainian defense forces that have had their cell phone turned off, or maybe it's in a Faraday cage or whatever. They'll call their family members and uh,
Mm.
notify them that there have been deaths in on the battlefield. And so what does the family member do? They call that soldier immediately, just to confirm and make sure whatever. And that's an omission, and that's a targeting signal that Russia has used in the past. So
Mm. Wow. Wow. So, is it policy now, as far as you know, that like U.S. Department of Defense deployments is like no more cell phones on deployment, or how, how, I mean I'm legitimately asking. I mean it seems like we should be going in that direction, but it would also not surprise me if that's not the case.
yeah, there are certain. I mean, I can only speak. I mean, I've been out of active duty now for 4 years.
Hmm.
But we were there's certainly SOPs that certain units have for traveling, and some of them are just really easy things on the defense side that are in the article, like, don't plug your cell phone into a airport, uh,
Hmm.
your charger, because who knows what's on the other side of that charger. Don't, when you're traveling, use a Faraday bag. Don't don't turn your computer on when you get pulled into like secondary questioning or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so there are definitely certain SOPs, and a lot of it is, geographically specific. So if you're going to, I remember running through airports in Abu Dhabi and using facial recognition. They take your picture. Well, UAE, their whole infrastructure is built with Huawei chips and by China, and so like you're already you
Mm.
have to operate in obscurity, and that's part of what was in the article. What former ASD Solic, Chris Mayer, mentioned was, security through obscurity. You have to be able to operate in this sort of digital environment where if you don't have a signal, if you don't have, a Facebook page or LinkedIn or social media, that is a signal in itself. And so we have to learn how to sort of melt into the information environment, um, depending on where you're going and what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, 100% on all that. What are I mean, you mentioned like like a like a Faraday cage, or like a cell phone bag. Are there any other relatively simple but also effective uh ways that individuals can discipline themselves and just take some reasonable steps today to uh, just make it a little bit harder for a bad guy to steal your stuff or mess up your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Faraday bags are definitely, you know, again, double-edged sword, right? No one's gonna get a signal in or out of that Faraday bag, but you can't use your cell phone, right?
Hmm.
Um, no data transfer cables So your charger, your phone charger, can transfer data, but there are cords out there that cannot transfer data. So
Really?
if you
Okay.
have to use, or if you have to charge a phone or charge something, a personal device, in a public space, make sure you have a no data transfer cable. I use those the power banks, right? So I'm not plugging my phone into a hotel wall charger or airport charger.
Oh, one of those like a portable battery.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Your home Wi-Fi signal, change your SSID, switch to private. If you want to get, go one more advanced, there are some certain routers out there that you can actually change your IP and MAC address, or you can flip between them. Um, if you want to take another step, you can install an entire firewall on your home Wi-Fi. I actually bought a Protectly firewall and
Mhm.
couldn't figure out how to install it. So Protectly, if you're listening, would love some tips. But
Well, a little help session.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, you're being like a boomer here, right? I can't figure out my tech. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm a I'm
Um,
I'm an old Gen Xer, so
yeah,
I'm almost a boomer. Not quite. Not quite.
yeah. And let me go back to Faraday bags and RFID blockers too, because it's not just your phone, there are near field communicator NFC chips in your credit cards, in your passport. Um, they're so you can so bad guys are doing something called blue snarfing. So you can essentially turn on your Bluetooth and they can extract signals from if your Bluetooth is on, and actually extract your credit card information on those NFC chips if they're not blocked. And
Right.
then
I
uh,
think you had a suggestion in your article, just like turn your Bluetooth setting off
yeah,
if you're not actively needing it.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There I've got two daughters. One of my daughters was telling me, or maybe it was my wife telling me about how a cute thing that some people are doing is getting their fingernails done and having like one of their nails like gluing or embedding a credit card chip onto like their pinky nail or whatever so that they can just pay for stuff with their tap with their pinky nail with the RFID chip.
Oh man,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a new one for me.
That's a new one, but I mean, that's the same thing as just not having a credit card in a whatever some kind of a envelope that is protected, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
oof,
yeah,
that's fun.
yeah. Anyway, well, I mean, uh, I got to tell you, Dave. I mean, some of the stuff I had heard of before, and I've like not taken sufficient precautions personally on some of this, but then other stuff like I quite frankly, I mean, have not did not realize that charger cords were a security risk. So that's something that I'm going to take a look at personally as well. So a lot of good practical advice for the aware citizen, but then also, as you said, in a national security context for our deployed forces. I mean, some of this introduces opportunity as well, I think, as you cover in the article, and using these digital signatures and lack thereof, or peaks and valleys in the noise of the information environment, and using that as opportunity to maneuver or conceal and reveal and hiding within the noise. I know we need to wrap up, but do you have any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, let me take one more step back and
Yeah, yeah.
something because there's some folks out there that might be like, well, I don't travel that much and whatever. But breach data is something that I didn't cover, we didn't talk about, but essentially information, your username and passwords that have been hacked. You ha if you're online, you have been hacked. Like your username and password is out there somewhere. So if you use the same password for your bank account as you do for your fitness app or Adobe Creative Suite or something like that, you're wrong. You need to go get a password keeper and make sure that you use different usernames and passwords for everything because something that we didn't have, at least, or we didn't, I didn't use when I was in the Army and we were doing some open source intelligence stuff and using publicly available information that is now publicly available. So I can go online, I can get into some dark web forums, I can get into some open web forums and download data sets that are leaked, that are hacked and leaked username and passwords. And if you're using the same password for your banking information as you are for something that doesn't have the same security and um, yeah, cybersecurity that a bank would, you're in trouble. And
Mm,
so to the information space, now the computing power and the information that's available online, if I can go out there and I can pull from hundreds or thousands of different publicly available information sources, I can now target an individual or a small group of people or an entire population at scale. I can plug all that information into some AI algorithms and LLMs, and I can use some of that to really refine my target audience analysis faster than I used to be able to, and with more dissemination methods and mediums than I used to be able to. So I think it's sort of like the breadth that I'm able to disseminate information is bigger, and I can be very target centric in how I appeal to an audience or an individual in a way that I have not been able to in the past, and I can do it faster.
okay. Yeah. Wow. Last question, and this um, uh, I get all kinds of calls, just like, random calls. Most of the time it says something about spam, but most any number that I don't recognize, I just don't answer. And I've wondered, is it a reasonable TTP to not only not answer a number that you don't recognize, but also don't like disconnect, let it ring out so that you don't have any kind of a signal back to the caller that there is in fact a human on the other end of the phone that they're trying to call. Do you get what I'm saying? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
is that like, nah, that's not a thing. Don't worry about that. Just go ahead and X the call and block it,
Yeah.
or
There used to be long ago, um, if you opt in, I say that in air quotes, right? If you
hmm
opt in, then that's like a tacit permission to just keep, berating you with calls and texts and all that kind
hmm
of stuff. And I sometimes I think about that because if I answer the call, am I opting in, right? But
Ah.
the other thing I think about too is if you answer, and sometimes, there's just nothing, there's just silence on the other end of the
hmm
and other times, it may be a real person or sounds like a real person and they want to get you to talk. But I mean, there are some really good AI voice
hmm
out there
hmm
that could, replicate your voice and or whatever. I don't know. I mean, this is a little out of my depth, but that's where my paranoid mind goes.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. All right. Well, fantastic discussion, and I think that, yeah, this is all like a public service announcement, or this is a dual use podcast discussion between national security considerations, but also private sector and private life considerations. So thank you so much, Dave, for lending your voice and perspective to the Cognitive Crucible. And with that, Dave Cook, thank you so much for being a guest on the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you. It's been awesome. Would love to come back anytime and come up to Congress. We'll give you a tour.
Hey, outstanding. Would love it.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.